Hi everyone, my name is Cameron and I work for Pikes Peak Library District. Today we're going to take a closer look at a Raspberry Pi computer. It's an affordable credit card size computer, but don't be fooled by its small size. People use these to control robots, make time-lapse cameras, or even play video games. To use this as a PC, you're also going to need a keyboard, a mouse, an HDMI cable, a micro SD card, we'll talk about that later, and some kind of a display. You can even, if you don't have like a computer monitor at home, you can even use your TV as long as it has an HDMI port. So let's go ahead and take a closer look at some of the things that we can find on this computer. But as you can see on this chip, there's a green plastic baseboard, and then there's all of these little tiny chips and components, and a few larger ones as well. We'll start right here with this big one. This is the CPU of the Raspberry Pi, and CPU stands for Central Processing Unit. And if you look closely, you can see all of these little lines on the chip all kind of end up at this main chip here that says Broadcom over the top of it. That's because pretty much every input or output that you go for in a computer runs through this chip. That's probably why it's called the Central Processing Unit, because it does all of those main tasks and then gets the output that you want. So when you hit a button on a keyboard, it runs into here and then back out to your display on the screen. On Raspberry Pi computers, this chip also contains the RAM. RAM stands for Random Access Memory. And RAM is actually what allows you to do things like change tabs on a internet browser and they're still loaded, or switch between programs and things like that. It keeps, it's a short-term thing that keeps programs running the way that they're supposed to. So sometimes you might need to restart your computer because it gets bogged down. Part of what you're doing when you restart your computer is clearing the RAM. So once it's cleared, then some of those things that you weren't working before will probably start working again. This Raspberry Pi model has 1 gigabyte of RAM, which is not really a lot nowadays. Most computers come with 8 or 16 gigabytes of RAM when you buy them. But again, this is enough to browse the web and do email and word processing and stuff like that. So RAM is one of those really important components of a computer that kind of make a difference in how fast it goes and stuff like that. So while this one doesn't have a lot, it has enough that lets us do what we need to do with the computer. If we move over to this corner over here, there's this little silver chip right here on the edge. That's actually the Wi-Fi and Bluetooth antenna for this computer. So this has Wi-Fi built into it. Some of the older models of Raspberry Pi don't even have a Wi-Fi antenna in them, but that's something they added here. And that's what this little chip is right here. Over to the right of that, you see this white top with all of these little pins. And then if you can see in really tiny script down there, it says display. That's one way that you can turn this, that you can use an external display with one of these computers. And you can even do things like make your own Game Boy and have its own built-in display and play your games right in this little tiny package right here, and even make it portable. It's pretty cool. Definitely dig into the resources in the instructions for this program, and you'll be able to find info on how to do some of the things like that. All right, and then I'm going to move over to another one of those white pieces with all the little pins here. And if you can see down there, it says camera. and that's actually a camera input slot. So if you wanted to make this into a time-lapse camera or use it to as a webcam for your online classes, you can attach a camera to this here using a little ribbon cable. All right, so we were here before. You can see these little ports. They all match up to these out here. So over here on the left, that is a micro USB port, and that's what goes to the power supply for this computer. So you will need to connect it to the power supply, but most of the ways that you buy these Raspberry Pis, they come in kits, and they usually come with a power supply as well. This port right here is an HDMI port. That's how you're going to connect this to an external display so that you can use the operating system on it. You actually can interact with these Raspberry Pis without any kind of display, but it's quite a bit more complicated to do that, and right now we're just setting it up to use it as a computer. Over here we have a headphone jack. A lot of phones don't have headphone jacks anymore, but these computers still do, so that you can use your headphones on it if you're listening to music or watching a video or something like that. And then over here on the end, we have a few more ports. These four over here are all USB ports. You probably use USB ports all the time, whether it's a flash drive or whatnot. This is where I'm going to connect the keyboard and mouse to interact with this computer. And this right here is an Ethernet cable. So this was for a wired internet connection. Even though this has a Wi-Fi antenna in it, you can also use a wired connection because it's sometimes a little bit more stable of a connection. I think I've hit all of the major components on this computer. The big ones you want to remember are probably the CPU, and then if you want to get more in depth with how to interact with these computers, these GPIO pins are pretty important. Now it's time to image our micro SD card in order to get the operating system for the Raspberry Pi onto a place that we can use it. I downloaded this software from raspberrypi.org. They're kind of the non-profit arm of the Raspberry Pi group, and they put together all of the educational stuff. So I'm going to first choose my operating system. And I'm going to use this one up here. It's kind of the main Raspberry Pi that you can use, Raspberry Pi operating system that you can use. But you see it gives you other options as well. RetroPie is actually the one that you would use to turn this into kind of like a Game Boy that you could use with old video games. But we're not doing that today. We're going to use this Raspberry Pi OS 32-bit. So I'm going to go ahead and click that one. And then the next thing I have to do is choose my SD card. I've already inserted my SD card into the computer, so it should show up here when I click this. So choose SD card, and then this is my 4 GB micro SD card. I'm going to click on that one, and then I'm going to hit write. It's going to give you this pop-up that says, all data on the card will be erased. Are you sure you want to continue? And yes, I do. And then it's going to get started with the writing process in a few minutes. There it goes. It's starting to work. So just wait for this to go to finish. It'll go through a bunch of checks to make sure it was done correctly. And if you don't get any errors, then you're all set to pop the SD card into your Raspberry Pi and to connect all of the different cords that you need to get started working with it. That's it for today's program on the Raspberry Pi computer. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope it inspires you to maybe go out and pick one of these up. I think they're really cool tools, not just for accessing the internet and stuff like that, but to explore computer science, to build things. Lots of different great things that you can do And I definitely hope that you take a look at grabbing one of these and kind of exploring what you can do with just a small little computer that you can kind of take anywhere. So enjoy, stay safe. We'll see you next time at the library.